Welcome back to the Positive Side Podcast. Glad you are tuning in. The host, Jeremy Todd, coming to you live from the World Headquarters. And, today, obviously we do all of our interviews on Wednesdays. Today, I'm super, super excited because anytime we talked about this briefly before we just got on here, is anytime you can meet somebody with the same name, greatness is all coming together. You know what I'm saying? So this is going to be an absolute super, super powerful podcast. And again, whenever I have guests that are this powerful, I'm probably more excited than he is. I'm jacked up. I'm fired up. I got Jeremy Ryan Slate on the show today, and he is the founder of Command Your Brand, podcast host, jacked up. He's been everywhere, done all kinds of crazy things in his life, but it all boils around with success and commanding your brand, obviously. So Jeremy, first of all, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, man. And as I was telling you before, to have the name Jeremy is just a really good thing, man, even though my wife tells me I'm just a legend in my own mind. So I don't know.
Well, hey, we're a power couple now, brother. We're in this together.
Love it, man.
Real quick, are you a crypto guy?
So I'm just really getting more into it now. I kind of, you don't get upset with me, but I was the one that said the whole thing was going to be a fad. Now I'm realizing it's not going anywhere. So I'm not a crypto guy, but I've been getting more into it recently.
I'm just curious because today, Coinbase went public today, and I got in on Coinbase a little bit, and I've been in crypto for a few years now, and it's just I was telling you earlier, this has been like one of the greatest starts of the year I had financially, and one of the reasons also is the cryptocurrency. I was just curious. On a side note. My question for you to start this podcast out is, when we talk about brands, and one of the things about this podcast, I always encourage people, go for your goals and dreams. The intro, which you didn't get a chance to hear, but on the actual podcast side, is the positive side of life, health, business, family, motivation. I really want to focus on business. I talk about all the other stuff all the time. When you meet somebody that has got this passion and they just don't know where to start, because it's overwhelming. It's how do I get started? Do I do social media? Do I do a podcast? Do I do a website? Where do you tell someone that's brand new, that's fired up about their passion? Where do you tell them to start?
Well, I think the biggest thing, man, is like a lot of people don't really find out what's out there first. You know what I mean? Like they're like, all right, I'm just going to create this thing. I'm just going to go for broke. And like me, the first podcast I did was called Rock Your Life, and somebody already had it and the name was trademarked. So I couldn't do it. And I ran into a problem pretty early on in that. So the first thing people really need to do is find out what's out there already. Like, what are people creating? What are they talking about? What's being done? And then the other thing is figuring out how you can be different than that. Because I think far too often people are, you can be inspired to a certain extent by people that are out there, but I think too often they're trying to be other people, right? Like they're trying to be Grant Cardone, they're trying to be Gary Vaynerchuk, they're trying to, be whoever it is out there, rather than just deciding, hey, I'm going to be myself. This is how I'm different. This is what I stand for. This is what I mean. And, sometimes it's easier said than done. I know it took me a long time to be comfortable with, going out there and being edgy when you need to, but like, you have to be yourself and be different. And if you don't start there, man, like nobody's going to remember you.
The thing goes back to, I'm not a big political guy, but, with all the fake news going around, but it's time to be more authentic now than ever. Yeah. I think that's what really separates everybody. And I goof around this show and I talk about extremely personal stuff on the show. And I think that's one of the things that makes, my podcast successful, your podcast successful, because all the struggles that I've been through. One of the things that I really want to talk to you about too, and when we talk about authenticity, talk about struggles, and you mentioned briefly about starting the podcast out, and man, I've talked about it 1,000 times. When I started my podcast out, it was like banging my head against the table trying to get it on iTunes. That was so frustrating, like brought me to tears, and I still never forget that pain. But I also talk about other real life stuff, being separated from my wife. And again, this is way too much information right off the bat. But, when I wrote a book recently, and I talked about it in my book about how I was molested when I was younger. And I put all these things out there on Front Street because it's who I am. It's my life. And when you were a long time ago, you were actually giving your last rites. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but when I saw that, the topic fascinates the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Take me through that, because, again, when we talk about people that have been, a lot of times this podcast has these people that have been through these traumatic life events and come out of it. It's not like we're not living off that. That's not who we are. That's not our life, but that's a big part of our life. So talk a little bit about that situation. And then I got a couple follow-up questions afterwards.
Sure. So I want to say the way that this happened, first of all, is it's embarrassing, man. So we used to play these like pickup football games on Sunday, but like we took it entirely too seriously, like way too seriously. Like, dude, I had the Under Armour sleeves, bro. I had the gloves, I had the cleats, and we would just tackle the hell out of each other without pads. So like, this was just not a very intelligent thing to do. So I was playing cornerback and, once again, taking it way too seriously. So you got to backpedal with the receiver for 5 yards and then you turn and run with them because, you take it way too seriously. Yeah. So I stepped in a drain and my cleat got stuck. So when I turned my body, I ripped every major ligament in my knee. And I just collapsed in that point. I couldn't stand up. And it's interesting because the adrenaline like hits you so hard, right? Like, when something like that happens, you don't feel it. Like it instantly hurt and then the pain was gone because it hurt so bad. The adrenaline just kicks in. So I tore my ACL, PCL, meniscus. Like I shredded my knee. And the surgery that I was supposed to have, believe it or not, is decently simple. What they do is it's called the cadaver ligament surgery. So they take a ligament out of somebody that's already passed, 2 screws in each end, and they put it into your knee, and the tissue in your body grows into it. It's good to go. So the surgery takes like a half an hour. It's super simple. But the anesthesia, where they put you to sleep, didn't go well on me. Basically what happened is rather than sticking the breathing tube into my right lung or between my lungs, they stuck it into my right lung. So my right lung overexpanded, my left lung collapsed. My blood oxygen level was plummeting and they couldn't like keep me awake. So I was awake and asleep and awake and asleep and awake and asleep. They brought in a cardiologist. They brought in all different types of doctors to figure out what was happening here. And eventually they just said, hey, we can't keep his oxygen level up. We don't know what to do about this. They brought in a priest and gave me last rites. And the wild thing is like, I was totally aware of all these, but I wasn't like awake or asleep. Yeah. I was like somewhere in between. It was like awake, asleep for a period of like 3.5 days. And then eventually, after like day 4, I woke up and my blood oxygen level was around 97, which is pretty good. And I was conscious again. But dude, it was a wild experience where you don't feel like you're in the room. You feel like you are the room, which sounds weird as hell. But it is the experience of you're totally hyper aware of everything there, but you're not awake.
So could you hear them giving you the last rites?
I could hear everything. I could hear. I was totally aware of everything, but I wasn't awake. That's what sounds really weird.
What goes through your head when you get your last rite, especially if you can hear them? Because, I've been around relatives and friends that have been given the last rites where they're out. They're already long gone, but they're, we're going through the process and doing the that whole thing.
Yeah.
But I can imagine being in the same situation and actually hearing it. Like what's going through your head when you're hearing that?
I think it's one of those things where like you look at it and you're like, nah, this isn't real. This definitely isn't real. Like I'm having a dream. This is what it is. Like it isn't real. And that was, I think, kind of the weird part about it, because I think a lot of people have life experiences like that. And then, like they know what they're going to do with their lives and their lives are changed and all that, but that didn't really happen for me. It wasn't until, when I was 24 and I almost lost my mom to a stroke that kicked in then, because I think it's because of this idea of like, it's something outside of yourself, right? Like it's not you. Because I think a lot of times we're selfish and we don't think it's happened to us, we're going to live forever, whatever it may be. But when it's somebody outside of us, like you just react differently to that, man. Like at least that was for me.
Yeah, it's wild, brother. I mean, I can imagine just the thought process of all those things that you're going through. So, okay, so you come out of it, you're good to go. Life's, traveling now. All of a sudden, you're like, you know what? Yeah. I need to do more. I'm going to start Command Your Brand. Why did you start Command Your Brand? Tell us a little bit about it and what your main goal is, because I think we've done several interviews to some of the people that work with you, and the people that I get on the show are awesome so far, and I just love the relationship that we got going on. But talk a little bit about the company and why you started it.
So interestingly enough, like I mentioned, I had that problem at 24. My mom had a stroke. I was teaching high school at that point in time, and I had a master's degree. I had studied at Oxford University, so like I was like this like highly educated, whatever. And like I was teaching high school. Like I just was not very happy doing it. And when that happened with my mom, it kind of sent me on a 3-year path of figuring out like what did I want to do with my life. So it started with network marketing. It went from there to selling life insurance, which I was actually pretty good at, by the way, but it's not fun getting up every day and realizing you're going to talk to people about their death. Like that's just, it's after a while, it gets really morbid. So I did that for a bit, and I went from there to actually private labeling and selling products on Amazon. But I left a promo code on my product listing to get it for free. So I went broke in like, a couple hours of like 250 products just gone. So I had been listening to podcasts since I was in grad school. I had a professor that had gotten me listened to this podcast called The No Agenda Show, where they basically just make fun of the news. It's a great show. And I've been listening to it forever. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can start a podcast because I failed at everything else. Like I need to do something for my own creative outlet or whatever, because I was working at a friend's marketing firm at that point in time. So then the first version of what I did was called, like I mentioned earlier, it was called Rock Your Life. Horrible show. We had like 40 episodes and 80 downloads. So you can see how well it was doing and how well listened it was to.
Yeah, right.
But it was bad. And it was back in the days of like, I didn't have a microphone, like I didn't have headphones, and like, it was very life coachy, which I am the furthest thing from. Like I'm just not that way at all. So like it was trash. So I quit that about 60 days in, and it took me a whole year later to start Create Your Own Life. So I made a list of the top 100 people I most admired and reached out to them, had a lot of success getting them to be on the show. And the biggest difference was approaching it as a professional. And a month into that, we had 10,000 listens in our first 30 days. Within the first year, people are saying like, hey, can you do this for me? So we started a company where we actually did like a done for you podcast. And like, I was doing way too much for people for way too little money. So I was like not making any money. Like I've heard that the purpose of business is to make money. I wasn't doing that at that point in time. So we looked at what our clients really liked. And when we launched the podcast, one of the things we did was actually put people on other podcasts because it just made sense, right? Like if you're already listening to shows, you should go on other shows. And our clients were kind of like, hey, it's kind of cool having a podcast, but dude, it's a lot of work hosting a podcast. Sure. So they focused on just really getting on shows. And when we decided that was what it was, we dropped the other 80% and we're like, all right, how can we do the best job possible at this? And in the last, 5 years, we've really focused on building the premier PR firm for the podcast space, coaching our clients on how to be great guests, getting them the right placements and really teaching what to do with content because it's just really vital.
Yeah. And what the biggest thing too, and one of the things I love about podcasts is just getting all these messages out for so many people that have great ideas, great stories that, we would never find before. I mean, before podcasts, you would never have these conversations with people in a billion years. And it just allows not only for me to grow with all the people that are going to be on my show but for them to grow, it's just, these conversations are so important. And I think they're more important now than ever with the world that's, it's turmoil, it's chaos, it's crazy.
Yeah.
All this shit's going all around the world. But however, you can come to this podcast and many other podcasts and find guests that are going to be inspiring, motivated, and actually give you an idea of how to look at the positive side, pun intended. How about that?
That's what it's all about, man. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you've got your podcast going on. What else do you do let's say there's someone brand new. Hey, I'll use my friend. I got one of my best friends. She just started her podcast. Mm-hmm. It's called Crush Your Day. She's great. What does she do now? She's got a brand new podcast. What would you tell her to do with her show? Does she go towards, are we doing, or do you go towards, social media wise? Are we doing Instagram? Are we doing Facebook? Are we doing LinkedIn? There's so many areas. And then I think that's where, it's analysis by paralysis by analysis. Like, oh my God, there's so much shit to do. Where do I go now? Because now I got the podcast. What do I do now with it?
So I think honestly, people do exactly what you said. They get paralysis by analysis. Like I tell people, pick one platform, pick one that you really like, focus on that and do the best damn job you can do there. And then as you feel like you're getting comfortable with that, you can start looking at other platforms. And it depends on like where your audience is as well. Like I spend more time on Instagram now than I did 2 years ago because I've started to, get more engagement there. But honestly, for me, the last 3 years, I think LinkedIn's really been the best place to be. We do a lot of like long form written content. It used to be video was great, but now it just doesn't get as much attention as it did. So we do a lot of long form written content, skipping lines between because you want to make it mobile friendly, and you tell a story in 1,300 characters. Like that's been really the way to do it. And then, as we've started to get more attention other places, like I mentioned, Instagram, we've been good on, Facebook, we've been good on, but I really just started by focusing on LinkedIn. So find your one platform, get good at it, and then you can start looking at other places. Like that's really what you got to do, man.
That's interesting with LinkedIn because, LinkedIn is hit and miss with me. I got quite a few followers on LinkedIn, and maybe, we can talk after the show and you can take a peek at my Instagram or my LinkedIn and see what, how bad I'm missing it. But again, I think it's like we talk about this over and over. It's just a matter of just, done is the new perfect. It's just a matter of getting it out there, getting your message out there and allow people to find it. And like you said, hey, if you're going to pick one, one platform, whether it be LinkedIn or Instagram, but you just got to get it done. Yeah. Why do you think people don't get it done? Why do you, what stops people? And, I guess if you're someone out there that thinking that just, man, this just isn't for me. What do you tell somebody like that that just doesn't have the motivation to do it?
I think a lot of the time, the thing it comes to is just too many gurus, right? Like they're like, oh, well, this person's telling me to do this, and this person's telling me to do that, and this person's telling me to do this, and they're not deciding, well, what works for me. So I think often people get paralyzed by just too many mixed messages, right? And if you're gonna follow somebody's method, pick one person. Don't pick 7, because you know what I mean. This one's not going to agree with that one. It's not going to agree with that one. So I think that's really what it comes down to. Is there's just too many gurus that people try to follow and emulate and whatever it is. So decide who fits your vibe, or decide to go your own way, man. But I think that is really the biggest thing that stops people. Is they're like, well, you know, Neil Patel says I need to do this with my SEO. And then Gary Vee says I got to create 60 pieces of content for every piece of content. But it's like, you can't do all that. You know what I mean? So pick what you like and stick with it and focus with it, and pick something. You know, you talked about authenticity earlier. Pick something authentic to you, right? Like pick something that feels right to you. It took me a while to figure out what felt great for me. Originally, I didn't like doing video. Now we do a lot of video, and I really like video. So you have to figure out what works for you.
Who do you follow and who inspires you?
You know, that's changed a lot over the years, man. Like it's changed a lot. Like I love Grant Cardone. I love Dan Bongino. Gosh, I'm trying to think of who else just really inspires me. I love a lot of like high level athletes, because I find that so much of what they do is so applicable to life, and it's applicable to so many different things, right? Like the mindset, the training, the ability to go farther and harder and whatever it may be. So, you know, it's, you have to find what inspires you. And that's what inspires me, man.
I heard this question the other day from another podcast. My good friend, Sam Crowley, much love to him out there. And he asked this question. I thought it was just an interesting question, but, and you talked about it, who you follow changes.
Yeah.
Do you still hang out with the people that you grew up with? And the reason I asked
so that's changed actually.
Yeah,
because
that's why I'm asking next. I think it's fascinating. Like, it's like fire your friends. Are your friends? I mean, some of them they're going to come along, but I was just curious, like where you stood in that.
So that's interesting, right? Because it's actually going kind of circular for me, because I think early on, I was kind of a dick. Not gonna, I don't know if can I say that on your show? Like,
you can say whatever the hell you want.
Okay, good. So like, you know what I mean? Like it was like, I don't know, like you get excited about what you're doing, you get too into other people's faces, and they're like, you know what I mean? Like you got to let them have their own reality, and you have your reality, knows what it is. So I kind of bombarded people early on and alienated a lot of my friends. So because of that, and I tried to be very self-righteous about it, honestly. And, I went and made other friends, which is great. But then the thing I found is once I realized the error of my own ways, I've come back around to those friends. So I think often we kind of tell ourselves a story to make ourselves right a lot of times. And that's what I did in that situation. Like maybe we don't hang out all the time, but we still talk and things like that. And we didn't before, because I had cut them out, and that was my own fault. So I think it's a matter of perspective and being able to look at that and see, like, where's my own responsibility in the situation? And is it me or is it them? And sometimes you'll find when you look in the mirror, man, it's us a lot of times.
You're so right. And then the reason I love how you answered that, because sometimes, I mentioned briefly that sometimes you got to fire your friends. You don't want to hang around with the same losers that were losers forever and ever. Now, and again, no disrespect to them.
Sure.
But I think more importantly, what you just said there was even more important, because I went through the same phase too. Like I was like, what, if you didn't like, I don't even know if it was my own self-conscious talking, like if you didn't support me 100%, F you, pal. I'm out.
I was the exact same way. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Somebody like, how does my ego get that? Blinding out my own friends. It's crazy. And then going back, it's almost like I'm reintroducing my friends again, because who I am now is not who I was 10 years ago. I'm a completely different person. I'm more,
and part of that's maturity, right? Like you get more life experience, you get more reality of how other people's lives are. So you react differently. And I think also at the same time, your own level of realizing what you're responsible for comes up. And I think when you can see where you're wrong and where you're right, because I think often we always want to be right, but when you can see where you're wrong, you can actually take responsibility for that situation and say, I was kind of a jerk here, not going to lie. Yeah. So, but it takes a lot to be able to get to that.
It does. And you're exactly right. It's growth. It's listening to podcasts. It's reading books. It's, having mentors, hiring coaches. It's all these things that are just, I'm just trying to get better every single day. And I mentioned books as well. One of my favorite authors is John Maxwell. He wrote a book called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. I always like asking my guests these same questions. Are you ready for the 7 questions from John Maxwell's book?
Hey, let's do it, man.
Let's rock and roll. Question number 1 for Jeremy Ryan Slate is, Jeremy, what is the greatest lesson you have ever learned?
Whenever you're upset, you should probably look in the mirror, because the person responsible is most likely you.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that, because I mean, to me,
well,
that makes so much sense.
Because here's the thing, right? Like if your health is poor, sometimes things happen to you, right? Like with things we can't control. But if your health is poor and you're not taking vitamins, you're not exercising, you're not doing a lot of that, a lot of the condition you're in may be because of that. Now, that's not to say like heart disease and cancer and things don't happen to people, because they do. But a lot of times we're create a worse situation by what we haven't done and what we haven't taken responsibility for. So that's the example I give.
Well, you're 100% right. And you mentioned vitamins and taking care of yourself, man. How important is that? That
it's
is
huge.
I just watched the show last night, and I'm sure you've seen it. I watched it, actually made my kids muscle through it. Super Size Me by I forget the guy's name.
Morgan Spurlock, man,
Morgan
back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I made my kids watch that, and they were going through some of the statistics about overweight people. And again, I don't want to make this about bashing overweight people, but
yeah,
where you are in your life is your responsibility. I think Jocko Willink says it the best. I mean, you are exactly where you are because of exactly where you are and the decisions that you made in your entire life. It's no one else's fault. It's extreme ownership. You are
correct.
where you are. And I think when you do that, when you actually look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, maybe it is my fault. Maybe it is my fault. How do I get better? And I think,
that's the hardest thing to admit too, because like, then you look at the condition and you're like, ooh, that was my fault. But here's the best part about that, right? If you're responsible for it, that means you can fix it as well.
Exactly.
And I think that's the beautiful part about it, is when you realize you can fix it and you can do something about it, you're not a victim anymore.
Exactly. And that's where the real strength comes from. That's where the power comes from, for sure. Question number 2 is, what are you learning now?
I'm learning better management skills, because I think one of the things is like our company has grown really fast. And the thing that I wasn't great at early on was, putting the structure there so that everybody can win. So that comes down to, writing better policies for the company. It comes down to, hiring the right people. So I've learned how to manage a business a lot better than I did a year ago. And honestly, that came down to us growing a lot and having to hire a lot more people and whatever it may be. So sometimes you just cope, but as you get better at those skills, man, it's a game changer.
Do you plan your schedule out on Sundays, Mondays, the week before? How do you work your schedule?
So there's 2 different ways on this. Like usually, because I use like a scheduler calendar. So people have calls booked with me through the week, but I'm usually preparing the night before for the next day. So based on like whatever I have on the books, I'll prepare that night before for the next day. I find that unless it's something that's like super important or super pertinent, or I have a huge interview, that's not something I'm really going to prepare for a week out. I'll prepare the night before. Yeah. Like this one, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. What time do you get up in the morning?
I got up at 4:30 this morning, because I knew I had this interview. I needed like 8 hours to prepare.
Absolutely.
No, I'm kidding. I'm usually up like 6:30, 7 o'clock, man. It's nothing crazy. It's just that my body needs a good 8 hours.
Do you, what's your morning routine? I'm always fascinated people's morning routine. Are you a meditation guy?
No.
Gym guy? Like, let me hear all that.
So I'm usually up first thing. I eat breakfast, go to the gym, and then I come back and take my cold shower. I do 3 to 5 minutes with cold water. I had changed the research I had read on this and stuff like that. I used to say 10 minutes or whatever, but I found 3 to 5 minutes to kind of be that right area. Like number 1, because it wakes you up. Number 2, because it helps your immune system. Number 3, it helps to shed body fat. So I'm really big on cold showers. It's a big deal. And then I don't take a phone call usually till 10 a.m. because it lets me get through my email, get all those things I need to get done before I ever talk to people. Because a lot of times, like, once you start taking calls and taking communication, a lot of times you're not going to get to the rest of the stuff you have to do. So I do all the important stuff first, and I don't take a call before 10 a.m.
Are you a checklist guy?
I use the it's called the Reminders app on my iPhone. So like, that's kind of like a checklist, right? Like here we got like this guy here, and everything I have to do during the day and whatnot. So like, if I don't have that, like, I'm not going to remember to do it. I have to write it down. There's just too many things happening.
Absolutely. Question number 3 is, how has failure shaped your life?
It's made me everything I am today, man. Like, everything I have done, I've learned from that failure, right? Like, I think too often people look at failure because our society says it's not a good thing. And like, okay, well, you just failed, go do something else. But for me, it's like, how can I grow in that moment? How can I learn in that moment? And what can I take away from that moment? I've learned to be a better salesperson. I've learned to be a better marketer. I've learned to be a better husband. So like, a lot of these things are where you fail, you learn to be better.
Yeah. I was going to ask a follow-up question for failure, but I don't think I'll ask it later. Question number 4 is, who do you know that I should know?
Who do you know? Who do I know that you should know?
Yep. And I asked that question in all honesty, because, recently when I started this podcast 4 years ago, I was asking the question a little bit here and there, and I wasn't really following up with it. And it's more now important because it's allowed me to have amazing guests lately in the last year that have just blown me away and exciting about it. So I asked that question with all seriousness, and you know,
so you need to know Kurt Mercadante is who you need to know. He is one of the most incredible human beings that I know. I started out as a client, became an incredible friend, and he's one of those people that I talk to all day, every day. So he's an incredible human being, great in the leadership world. You need to talk to Kurt.
K-U-R-T or K-R-K?
C-U-R-T.
C-U-R-T. Okay. How do I spell his last name?
Okay. I feel like this is the National Spelling Bee. Mercadante. Mercadante.
Perfect. And obviously, I'd really appreciate if you could invite it or introduce.
Oh, I will absolutely connect you guys after this call. I will definitely connect you guys.
I love having people that rock and roll. Where do you live?
I'm in New Jersey.
Oh, no way. That's cool.
The armpit of America. I'm there, but I'm rapidly trying to get out because I just want to go to a different state.
Where are you gonna go?
I'm looking at Florida and surprisingly Mississippi because real estate's really cheap there right now.
Oh, it's gotta be cheap in Mississippi for sure.
Oh, it's so cheap, and the property taxes are like ridiculous.
Well, you know, I watched the movie I was saying about Super Size Me, and actually, according to that movie, Mississippi is the fattest state in the United States.
Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas, man, they all go back and forth. They're like, you know, who can be fattest this year? But exactly. It's, you know,
that's a award I don't want to win, my friend. Question number 5 is, what have you read that I should read?
The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. It's one of the best books I've ever read. I think people far too often, they try something once and it doesn't work and they give up. When you realize the amount of effort it actually takes to move the ball forward, dude, it's a game changer. I
did read that book and I've got an autographed copy. It's a great book. Damn. I've actually read quite a few different Grant Cardone books. I've read Seller Be Soul, I think is one of his. I'm off the top of my head. I can't remember the rest of them. But
Seller Be Soul was his first one.
Okay. Yeah. The 10X Rule by far is, you know, being in the automotive industry, Grant Cardone is, you know,
that's he's so well known in that industry. Yeah. That's where he started.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm a fan of his to a certain extent, but I love that book. You're exactly right. That book is huge. Yeah. If you haven't read it, go out there and check it out. And really it was just a matter of whatever goal you say, you want to make $1,000, you want to make 10,000. Instead you want to make 100,000, you want to make $1 million. And it's just 10X and everything in your life. And it made a huge difference in my life early on, and I'm glad I read it. So I appreciate you mentioning that book. Question number 6, 2 more left, is what have you done that I should do?
What have I done that you should do? I don't know, man. Trying to think. Like, I don't know. I don't do anything special or unique. Like, I don't know. I pulled an army tank. That was kind of fun.
I'm not gonna do that.
Okay. And I like to pick up heavy stuff all the time. That's what I do. Cause like I've always been like a fitness buff, guy. So I don't know, pick up some heavy stuff. That's what I would say.
Well, I need to get back. I did CrossFit for a while and I know,
CrossFit's not my speed, man. It's too much fast movement there. I'm usually doing, like just heavy power stuff. Like I can't do a workout that's longer than a half an hour. I'm just like, I get bored.
Well, I think that's important though. I mean, I think lifting heavy stuff, Joe Rogan mentions it all the time. Just move heavy stuff. It tells your body that, oh shit, I need to be prepared to move heavy stuff. So just makes your whole body just a little bit stronger. And that in conjunction with taking vitamins and minerals and taking care of your health again. Very, 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 very important, especially with all the craziness with COVID going around, which, it's too bad that COVID had to bring out to tell the obvious that you guys take care of yourself. I mean, why the hell do we need COVID to tell us that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when you look at a lot of the what's not funny, but I'm saying like it's a coincidence, I guess would be a better way to say it. When you look at a lot of the countries that have like higher death tolls, it's the countries with the highest obesity rates. 100%. So it's like in some ways, we need to take control of our health, and these things are still going to hurt when they come, but they're going to hurt a whole lot less if we're healthier.
Absolutely, no question about that. Once again, we're talking to Jeremy Ryan Slate, founder of the Create Your Own Life podcast. I didn't even mention that, so I apologize about that. That's we'll talk a little bit about the podcast real quick because I'm obviously a podcast junkie. Let me hear about the podcast.
Yeah, so we interview world-class individuals about what it means to be so. Like we've had NFL Hall of Famers, we've had Olympic gold medalists, we had the former CIA director. We really try to figure out what makes people special, unique, and different to really do things at the highest level.
Also founder of Command Your Brand, which I'm excited about. I love the company. I love where you're going with the company too. But final question, extremely important to me. And I ask this question a lot, but it means a lot personally. But all BS aside, how can I add value to you?
You have already today, man. Like I love awesome conversations because that's what my whole life is built around. You know what I mean? So like, you've added a ton of value in my life by doing this. So like that's what my whole life is about, is conversations.
That's I mentioned earlier too about the podcast, having these conversations with people all around the world, and it's really completely changed my life for the good, because not only motivationally, inspirationally, but just informationally, man. I mean, I'm learning so much. I was a shitty student in high school and college. It was terrible. They were glad to let me get out of school. And, but I've learned more now in the last 4 or 5 years than I have in my entire life. And I owe it strictly to podcasting and reading and self-development. I mean, it all goes hand in hand together. When you start doing one, you start doing all the other ones. But Jeremy, I really appreciate you jumping on, man. Tell everybody where they can find you, where they can check you out, where they can follow you. Tell us everything.
Absolutely. So the best place they can find me is over at commandyourbrand.com, and they can find out anything about the podcast, anything about the company. But that's commandyourbrand.com. That's going to be the best place to find me.
My friend, I really appreciate you jumping on the show. I know you're extremely busy. I know you got up extra early this morning as well at 4:30.
Hey man, I got up at 4:30 because I knew I had this podcast. I had to practice.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure I could say my name properly, because I knew it was really important to get Jeremy down. You know what I mean?
Well, you can sleep in tomorrow for sure, my friend, because this is going to be the highlight of your week for sure. But hey, everybody out there listening all around the world, again, it means a lot that you're spending time and watching these interviews and sharing these interviews. It's awesome. It's exciting. But more importantly than anything, you got to take action. And I talk about it all the time in the show. It's, if not now, then when? I mean, when becomes never. And it's just extremely frustrating. And I don't like that, because that's the whole point of this podcast, is taking action. Look at the positive side of life, health, business, family, and motivation, getting jacked up, and then going for those goals and dreams. Because before you know it, you never know. You could be like Jeremy on your freaking deathbed, getting your rights read, and you never know. I mean, you just never know. And I'm the one guy that I'm not going to be on my deathbed saying to myself, damn, I wish I would have. So for, again, everybody out there listening around the world, find Jeremy, go to the commandyourbrand.com. If you got any questions, obviously email me, jeremy@jeremytodd.com. Check that out. Check out the book. Obviously the book's exciting, and subscribe to me everywhere. I say this in every single episode. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. You've got greatness within. Like always, this is The Positive Side.